Hello, good day, and wondrous morrow to you all. Welcome back to Creation ModCon. I'm the one they call Captain Stew. You may recognize me as Captain Olmsted of the Dawn's Venture from Beyond Skyrim's Wares of Tamriel. And I will be helping you along on your little adventure over the next 2 days, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Still to come on day one, we have our Throats of the World panel, where I will be joined by some of our mightiest voice acting talent from across the mod projects. We then joined the Bellas Chosen in our colourful art panel, which zigs splendidly into our fan art contest. So I hope you brought your painted troll fat. And don't forget to grab your jackboots too, as we round the day off with our Skyblivion walkabout. And if you're just joining us, please don't be afraid to go back and check out the opening Rulers of Tamriel panel with our imperious project leads mooting about all things Skyrim. We will be here waiting for you to catch up, don't you worry. Now, to the matter at hand, and for that matter, gravity too, for these talented few deal with both. Welcome to our 12 Worlds panel, and don't forget to send us questions in the chat for our Q&A at the end of the panel. Let's meet our level designers. D, let's start with you. Tell us about yourself and where you work.
Oh my god, that was such a good intro. I love that.
Oh well, you know, thank you. I do my best.
I'm D. I'm the lead level designer on Skyblivion. I'm the co-lead of the interior department, but I'm the main lead of the exterior world design. So yeah, in Skyblivion.
Perfect. How about Uber? Tell us about yourself.
Hello, I am Uberman123. I am the one of the co-leads on Beyond Skyrim Iliac Bay. I also do a lot of level design, and I used to operate the level design department as well for it.
Cool beans. Roast, tell us about yourself.
I'm the interiors and dungeons director for Beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil.
Perfect.
So,
UCM.
yeah.
Oh, sorry to jump on you there.
Hello,
Oh,
I
God,
am
sorry.
UCM, level designer for Skywind. I've been on the project for a little over a year. I joined when the lockdowns happened because I needed some way to experience the outside world, and I chose a project that I've been following for many years before that, but finally had time to work on.
And Zix, introduce yourself again.
Yo, I'm Zix. Again, I'm back. But if you don't like me, sorry. Yeah, I'm a level designer on Skywind as well, and I'm in a special position of also doing the 3D mainly for the level designers, so like tile set work and stuff. So I offer a different mindset, I suppose.
Cool. And Zix, whilst we've got you, might as well start with you today. What was your biggest influence when it came to getting started in level designing?
Oh God, my biggest influence was I was one of those kids, who had like Legos growing up and all that stuff. So, putting pieces together and building things, creating was very much like a portion of my life that I had grown up with through like age, 4 until I guess now. And just making something completely new and having, at least with this project, the experience of delivering that to a bunch of people that are going to see it and experience it for themselves is something huge. And that's mainly my inspiration for it. And I just love seeing creative new stuff. It's so awesome to see.
And how about you, Roast? What was your biggest influence in getting started?
I've also, same with him, I've also been at Lego and stuff, but also my main influence to get into the creation kit was because I didn't want to buy something from the Creation Club because there was some dungeon which I thought looked quite cool, and I just didn't want to buy it, so I decided I'd make my own. But
Cool.
I actually ended up buying it.
Well, you tried.
It was quite a good one. It was quite a good one, though.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was worth it. It was worth it. And
Yeah.
two very level-headed responses as you'd expect from level designers. Suppose staying with you, Roast. What was been your favorite dungeon or exterior area to work on?
Probably like caves because of how flexible the set is. But also, I made a town called Ione, which is also one of my really happy with that one as well because just really like the environment it's in. It's really nice placing all the. Yeah, it's this really Westworld is really nice area.
Yeah. How about you? Same question to you, CM.
I'm kind of the opposite. Caves, because you can do so much with it, it's almost paralyzing the amount of choice. I've preferred working in more obviously architected tile sets, tombs, interiors, things like that, that someone clearly built. And then I like to twist that in ways that the original designer did not intend and cause headaches for the nav mesh department.
Oh god.
Love you guys.
Toadstool Hollow.
Oh dear. D, how about you?
Mine's kind of a tough question. Well, it's a tough answer because it's not a specific area. It's more of like a specific asset or like aspect of the level design, which is the recreating the Imperial forts around Cyrodiil. Because and again, I can't choose which one I love more because they're like all my kids. So it's because we have such like a versatile fort kit. I think it's something like over 2,000 pieces that we get to play with, and you can make any sort of shape you want for the fort. And remaking them, I got to go down this like rabbit hole of just looking up all these sort of old English castles, and then looking at sort of Roman castles and trying to find that nice in between to get that imperial look that we know from the Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
And just getting to do that, it's like a lot of them said it is like Legos, only it's for me it was like digital Legos, just getting to build this thing, and you just get to do so much with it, and it's so fun. Yeah, I think the forts definitely for me.
Well, I'm actually going to throw you a bit of a curveball here because something just struck me that with a lot of creatively minded people, their favorite piece of work is generally the last one that they did. Do any of you guys feel like that? Like you're only as good as your last kind of piece you did, or do you find that because there's so much width in what you're doing, it's kind of peaks and troughs?
I think for me, that's kind of I feel like that's kind of something a lot of level designers have to fight. Is yeah, naturally, like spent years on this project, you're going to get better at it. You're going to get better at like more intuitive level design, learning how to direct the player without even thinking. And one of the things like a level designer kind of has to fight is you have to fight going back to your old work and completely redoing it. And you kind of have to just respect your old work and not, constantly redo everything. Otherwise, by the time you're done redoing that work, you're going to look at the work you abandoned previously to redo, and you're going to try and redo that.
Yeah.
I feel about the same way. I felt like, man, Arya Tomb is my best work yet. Man, I sure do love Rita's Tomb. That was great. Hey, Andalin Tomb's going great. Corpusarium, best work I've ever done. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, it's healthy.
I kind of feel the opposite way about that. I have some dungeons that I've done where I'm just like, this is the best thing that I've ever done, and I just keep them as my favorite child in my mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a level designer, you've got to be constantly improving yourself.
I keep wanting to redo some of my older caves that I made last year, but I even planned to redo some, but I guess I shouldn't be doing that.
Well, that's funny as well because that's a luxury a lot of people in the creative industry don't actually have, is being able to go back and fix it kind of a little bit. So that's quite interesting. I'll move on to the next one. I'll stay with you, D. Actually, actually this one goes out to all the Skywindies and the Skyblivies, if you don't mind. So how have previous incarnations of the areas that you've been working on affected your design for the better or for the worse? Do you feel like you've improved on areas, or perhaps it's been a struggle to recreate certain areas? Starting with you, D.
Definitely, I feel like the entire department, the entire landscaping department, and the interior department on Skyblivion have done that. Like for the landscape, Oblivion, I think a lot of its landscape was originally auto-generated, so like the artists at Bethesda they didn't have the time to spend on like the wildernesses, unfortunately. So I think an area where that's like very clear was Blackwood, which was the area I was assigned to originally, and it was in the original Oblivion very hilly, not very flat swamplands. So it was, and so I basically got like full creative freedom to kind of do what I want and to just completely turn it into something that would suit bordering on Black Marsh. So I did. And I was working on that for 4 years before I finally had to like just finish it and say goodbye to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I definitely think that's one area that's been greatly improved character wise, because I think for Cyrodiil, I think this would it's important for Beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil as well, which is Cyrodiil kind of has this you know it's touching every other province around it. It's touching Skyrim, Black Marsh, Morrowind, High Rock. So it has all these distinct sort of regions and climates that it has a little piece of. So it's very important to kind of make those all look very distinct. Yeah.
Yeah. UCM, how about you? What are your thoughts?
I mostly work in interiors, so I've got sort of two answers. One, to sort of tie into the previous question, the first dungeon that I ever did was an ancestral tomb that had like 2 rooms, I think, in the original game. And originally I just recreated it basically as it was with our updated tile set. That didn't work out because before the game even loaded, all the vampires, all 5 of them, had killed the player before the black screen vanished. So that was one that I actually got to go back to my very earliest contribution to the project and just completely redo from the ground up. So so definitely expansion has been necessary, not just to work with modern preferences, but also just technical limitations of the Skyrim engine that if it's too small, you will die before you can even load.
Yeah.
Another thing that I did, though, my most recent work, Redis Ancestral Tomb, it's part of a Redoran quest line where you have to go in and get some artifacts from an old family. And in the original game, for some reason, a section of it was flooded with no indication of why it was there. It could have been a pool, could have been natural, just water seeping into the tomb. But either way, it did not seem like it was meant to be there. But because of the limitations of Morrowind, it was just there. So we got to sort of reinterpret the entire tomb as being, it's near the coastline, near water. So we got to interpret that as extensive flooding, complete with a wonderful little surprise at the end when you actually managed to collect the axe that you were sent there for. Very, very Indiana Jones vibes, which I very much enjoyed working with, and thanks to Thermo, our coding lead, for making that work.
Well, apparently Bethesda have the Indiana Jones vibes now as well, so that's funny. Uberman, same question to you.
Yeah, so I wanted to answer this question because the previous 2 people answering are working on areas that are based on what I would call relatively new games, Oblivion and Morrowind, whereas the areas that I primarily work on came from Daggerfall, which came out in 1996. That's 25 years ago. And a lot has changed in level design, what is considered good and acceptable level design for a video game since then. I don't know if any of the people in the audience have played Daggerfall, but it is rough. Some of the interior design, they are extremely maze-like. If people want to get onto me for Toadstool Hollow, go play Daggerfall, okay? So what we had to do is we have to find creative ways to keep the theme and essence and soul of a dungeon, things like Privateer's Hold, without actually doing exactly what they did in the dungeon design. So you've got to have ways of making things be maze-like while also keeping it playable. This can also apply to the exterior design. There are locations in Daggerfall's exterior that look nice. They've got a theme to them, but the limitations of the actual game itself, the engine, what could be drawn with computers at the time, have held it back considerably. So everything is kind of flat, kind of low resolution. So we've got to go through, pick out exactly what is the soul of this area rather than try to recreate it as it is.
Yeah, that's that's 3 quite contravening points. I'll move on to the kind of next question. Back to you, Dee. What is your favorite tool, function, or workflow used in Creation Kit, and how does it help you to get into the more specifics about how you guys work?
Oh, easy question. And that's definitely the opals, which is the object palette editor. So it used to be whenever I started landscaping, I would have to place down every tree and rock and then rotate them and scale them individually just to add a little variation. And then when I discovered the object palette editor, it basically lets you just put a bunch of objects, on a palette, and customize it how you want. So you can, if you're working on a specific biome, you can put that specific biome's trees, rocks, and plants and flora all in there just to have a personalized object window for it, as well as you get to like randomize the rotation and the scale of these objects. So it basically means a landscaper could grab a bunch of trees and then make a forest within 5 minutes. That's how quick it lets you create something. And it's like if you had a line graph of like my work rate after I discovered opals, it would kind of look like a roller coaster that would never come down. So it's been amazing for my work rate.
Same question to you, Uberman.
Well, actually, I am gonna copy that exact same answer and say opals again. I feel like this is going to be a very common thing among level designers. It's such a basic seeming idea when you think about it, but it changed level design so much for Skyrim. Like, I cannot go back to previous games level design. I tried, and it's impossible because opals make everything easier. Every single step of the level design process. Exteriors, you just put on a music track, you go ahead and you dot down trees and plants, whatever order you want. Interiors, you make a clutter opal, and then you can just place down clutter in however you want. I've got separate opals for different themes, things like what kind of enemies are in this dungeon. I've got a necromancer opal. I've got an opal for placing down stalactites on the ceiling. Everything is so much faster, and I love it.
Awesome. And Zix, what are your thoughts?
Oh boy. Well, at this point, I think I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, but opals are pretty great. I will say. One thing I will mention is opals can sometimes take a long time to make unless I'm doing it wrong. If I remember correctly, it takes kind of a while to like drag all the assets that you want into like the opal window and sort of setting the settings where it's like plus or minus 20% of the scale and whatnot. So one additional thing that I would add to it is it was pretty neat when I figured out you could have two separate object windows open. So you can sort of, if everybody knows what the creation kit looks like, or if you're looking at it on screen right now, you have like an object window on the left-hand side of the screen where it lists all your assets that you can drag into the render window and, move around and whatever. If you're working with like two different tile sets, for example, you can have open like the cave tile set in one object window. And then you can also have like, I don't know, a Dwemer ruin or something, a tile set open in another window. And then you can have both of those be able to drag things in as opposed to making an entirely like full opal where you have all those things together.
I actually didn't know that.
I have
Well
two
then.
object windows and an opal, so I'm pretty greedy.
Does anyone else in the panel have any recommendations that aren't opal? Are we all agreed that opal is like the best thing?
I like using control scroll wheel to cycle through different items, different objects in the creation kit. I haven't really used opals before, so I should get to that.
There you go, eh? So keeping on the same kind of theme, what tools, kind of functions or systems do you wish existed in Creation Kit that maybe exist in other kind of engines that could help you? I'll start with Uberman for that. What are your thoughts?
Well, the Creation Kit is a massive improvement over previous games' construction sets in a lot of ways, but there's only one system that I wish had some improvement, and that is the landscape editor, the thing that you use to actually change the shape of the land mesh that goes below all of the objects, the thing that you walk on in exteriors, because it's very basic. If you ever see something like a ramp shape in the game, you need to know that that was probably made by hand. That is somebody grabbing each individual vertex of the land mesh and pulling it up so that it makes a rough ramp shape. Whereas other games as development engines, modding systems tend to have some way of making ramp shapes. The only tools that we have are individually pick and move vertices for the landscape up and down. You can flatten things and you can smooth things. That's it. Those three functions. That's all that we managed to do all of these massive landscapes with, is those three functions. Aside from the colossal amount of work that was done by various people for building the original height map that we're basing this on.
Nice. Same question. Let's go for Roast.
I wish there was like a function that would allow me to also same actually like quite annoying with the landscape editor trying to do like ramps and things. I agree with that. Yeah. I have tried to make some things like that and it is quite annoying. I agree. Uber.
Well, we have an agreement there. UCM, how about you?
An interior level designer, I would kill for the ability to have layers like the Fallout 4 creation kit has. One thing that's very annoying when you're working on dungeons is we'll have trigger boxes that are invisible to the player, fog bodies, those big dust clouds that are just rolling around through rooms. If you want to ever like fix a plate or something on a table, you have to click and either move or temporarily disable all of those objects, those invisible objects that are hovering above it. Fallout 4 allows you to set a bunch of those in a layer, and then just disable them all at once. I would kill for that because it is the most mind-numbing part of working on anything when you're almost done, and then you notice that one flower pot is hovering 2 inches off the table.
Oh no. All right, the same question for you, Zix.
Okay. I think I have sort of a unique take on this question. I had mentioned previously that I'm sort of more so in the 3D world now. Like I'm creating the tile sets, for example, that level designers would use. So a tool that I would want, it would save a heck of a lot of work for me, is one that is actually probably completely alien to anybody using Creation Kit, but somebody who might use maybe Unity. I know for a fact it's in Unreal Engine as just a default tool. And I think it's because the Creation Kit uses the NIF format. If we didn't use the NIF format, we would have the ability to just drag in, let's say, for example, FBX files. And that's so much easier than dragging in a NIF file and setting it up and setting up the shading and blah, blah, blah. When you drag in that FBX file in other engines, for example, you would also be able to change the scale of it, not in a uniform way. So you could change the scale of a tile set piece that's, let's say, 1-to-1. You could alter the scale just on the x-axis to make it a 1x2 or make it a 1x4, and the UV map would also stretch along with it, so it looks nice. This would save a heck of a lot of work for tile set artists. We wouldn't have to make like a 1x1, a 1x2, a 1x3, a 1x4, etc., etc. You would just be able to give your landscaper basically a Lego block, and they could stretch and contort the Lego block to what they wanted. You could make like angled ramps with just a flat square. You could do so much. You could basically make a pillar out of like, a single block. That sort of stuff is sort of alien to like Creation Kit just because it doesn't have the capability to do that. But something like that would save tons of work for 3D artists, and I'm sure the level designers would appreciate that too. I can probably count on 20 different hands how many times I've had to stretch one thing, but I had to go to 3D instead because I couldn't do that in the engine.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to take us on to the old Q&A now. We've had loads of questions, and I'm actually going to stay with you, Zix, because I've got a question that kind of ties on to that theme. So the question would be, can the work on Beyond Skyrim, Skywind, or Skyblivion be used to get a job in the industry? So what kind of skills do you think you've learned that you could maybe use as a means of getting into the industry further?
Anyone mind if I take this one on? Because I think I have some experience in that.
Oh yeah, please do.
All right. So what I want to mention is, first of all, I have Beyond Skyrim on my resume, and I think that it is actually fantastic because, first of all, mostly applicable for tech-related jobs, is that it's very valuable to have a personal project of some sort on it because it shows to the recruiter, even if your personal project isn't strictly something related to the role that you're getting into, it can show things like personal drive, that you like to develop skills that you're on your own as well. And it also shows things like soft skills, things like were you in a management or a leadership position on the project? And I am on Beyond Skyrim. So it helps with lots of different ways, even if the job that you're looking for isn't strictly, opening the creation kit and doing level design. You don't have to be getting a job at Bethesda for this to be relevant.
Cool. Has anyone else got anything to add to that?
Yeah, it definitely does. Like learning how to design levels is something that isn't restrictive to a particular game engine. That's something you can take with you in whatever game engine you're working in. It's just you're learning how to direct the player in certain directions, how to present certain sites to a player. Those are things that are universal in games that you need to learn, stuff like that. And yeah, I'd say I think another big one is learning how to work creatively with a team, because that's a pretty tough one. Creative people tend to like to have full control over this creative thing that they want to make. Learning to work with other creative people is very important in the industry. It means I think especially for projects like this, you have to learn. Yeah, you have to get good at arguing in a very optimized way. You got to learn to like argue over creative differences within, I don't know, like 2 minutes. And there's got to be a solution by the end of it. And you got to be able to still, like each other and work with each other afterwards. You get good at arguing and still respecting each other. I think that's something that really helps out in the industry as well.
Yeah, two very good points. Anyone else want to add anything to that? No? All right. Well, I'll keep your questions coming in for the Q&A. We are getting some absolute banging questions. This one is a favorite of mine. I think this question says more about the person we're asking it to than your actual skills as a level designer. But to all of you, how hard is it not to add an Easter egg into every dungeon you create?
That's a question for someone who hasn't added an Easter egg to every dungeon.
Well, I usually actually kind of restrain myself. The more fun side of it, I think, is trying to do storytelling by showing, which is one of the big things that level designers have to do, often independent of writing. So it's not so much an Easter egg as just find some cool little story that you can tell only by the objects that you've placed down.
Go. Roast?
I don't do too many Easter eggs. I only really do them when I can think of them, but I've had to keep restricting myself from putting some copy pasta in some note in some of my dungeons.
I do like a bit of copy pasta. It's always fun.
I think it's also important. At least for me, I like to. It's good to let an Easter egg. It's good to let an Easter egg pop into your head as you're working on something like relevant. One Easter egg I was doing was like I was doing Blackwood Swamp, and this scene from Neverending Story, where the horse drowns in the swamp. That popped into my head, and I was like, oh, all right, I gotta add that in. So there's like a dead horse dead in a bog somewhere in Blackwood. I think as long as you as long as it like suits the Easter egg suits the place you've put it in, I don't think that's too bad. And maybe it's not too obvious, then I think it's fine. Like, you got to be careful with Easter eggs. I had to fight. I had to fight the urge to put an axe swing in one of the bogs as well. Although that would have put a bit of pressure on the 3D department.
I was just gonna add on to in the way that you have to be careful with it. Imagine, every level designer's doing their own thing. If they all have the same idea of putting like a Dark Souls bonfire in a dungeon, for example, you're gonna end up with Dark Souls bonfires all over the game. Every which way you turn, you're gonna see a Dark Souls bonfire.
People are gonna be thinking, "Wait, is this a mechanic now?"
Yeah, exactly.
We've got one in it.
There you go.
I think one week in lot is the sword in the stone. It's so cliche.
One that we also see a lot is just skeletons posed in a funny way, similar to how Fallout 4 ended up having those.
I've heard the level designers had so much fun with that.
From what I hear, they had created a whole new body placing system that is absent in Skyrim, just almost for those Easter eggs.
From what I understand, that would actually be quite a handy tool to have in Skyrim. I've heard some horror stories from you guys already about trying to move bodies and such.
Oh yeah.
I lift them up, turn Havok on, let it drop, decide if I'm happy with it, raise it 6 feet back up in the air, rinse and repeat until it finally flops over in a way that I like.
Oh! I might be able to contribute.
Oh, yes?
If you hold down Alt, you can select a limb and move that around in Havok.
My problem is that the skeletons don't really move like they used to in Oblivion, where the limbs would move independently. Now it's sort of like the whole skeleton is jelly and it just sticks together. I might be doing something wrong.
No, I do know what you're talking about. It used to be it would just fall apart. I remember I did one thing where I scattered a skeleton all over the room, and then Script resurrected it, which just made it all come flying together, which was pretty fun when I was playing around scripting at 16.
Well, that's the thing about skeletons, they're not what they used to be.
Mhm.
I'll move on to the next question. What methods do you guys utilize to make the world feel real versus something that feels constructed? That's another community question, so keep them coming in.
I think it's a good. I think you're kind of looking for a balance of something that looks kind of real and constructed, because it needs to be constructed for the player. I feel like, because sometimes if you're in like a very mountainous region, there's very few places you can walk. There's like one path, and that's not really suitable for an RPG game. The player kind of always needs to be able to go off the path and go whatever direction they want. But it does need to be constructed in a way where you're kind of always trying to get their attention in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's a fort's design looking interesting to grab them over there, or an enemy in the other direction. So I think it's trying to make the constructed look realistic at the same time. As for kind of making it look realistic, reference images always help. Trying to decide sort of which part of the world you can kind of base your region off of kind of helps.
I can sort of second that for interiors. There's a lot of it is a balancing act between what is realistic, like a cave in or enough cobwebs to choke out a hallway, but there's also has to be some lighting for the player. There has to be a way through down to get wherever you're needing to go. You can't add a secret door that opens up with a lever to get out of every dungeon in Skyrim. It doesn't feel real, and the player notices that. But you also have to sort of trick them into suspension of disbelief, to accepting certain things, like, oh, there is a conveniently shaped hole in the floor here that I can jump through that takes me to the boss or what have you.
A lot of that kind of making that feel real is about the detail that you put around it. So for a hole punched in the floor, make sure that it's not just a square hole with clean edges. You've got to make sure that there are little broken bits of wood sticking out around it. You need to be able to look at the level and think of, how did this happen? What was the situation that led to this specific thing looking like this?
Yeah, detail tends to be a very good way of directing the player's attention, because it's natural. If there's a sort of blank area, not as interesting, not going to capture the player's attention. Highly detailed, it's just like a natural sort of. That's like one of the ways level designers learn how to kind of direct the player without the player noticing.
The sort of hard mode version of hard mode version of doing that comes into play when you're doing exteriors. So if you start doing something like putting down a creek, you've got to put thought into the geology of how did this creek end up going this way. I've got a lot of places in Hammerfell that are being redone probably right now, that where a river is flowing the wrong direction, it's going uphill. If you think about the overall shape of the province, stuff like that.
UCM, did you have a point there you wanted to throw in?
Just real quick, one very challenging thing with someone said something about open spaces is tile sets that obviously repeat, walls or floors, adding enough texture, enough other items to sort of cover that and hide that up, like rugs or ivy growing over the walls, things like that, to just sort of disguise the reality of the situation, which is that tiles do repeat, and very much take players out of it when they notice that.
Yeah. I'll move to the next question. I think Rose Gorilla kind of touched on this one a little bit with his copy pasta a wee bit, but what's your favorite asset in your game? Something that you just have to sneak into everything.
I probably I'm probably that sometimes, but I generally delete it before I submit my plugin. I also generally when I make a new asset, I always like to try and place it somewhere because I'm just wanting to use it. When like some brazier I made, and now I try and put it in a whole lot of dungeons I make, even if it's not the right type of dungeon to have it. So I generally just have to remove it as well.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of a fun thing because if you ask any level designer, I guarantee you they have a favorite rock. Every single one, without fail.
Yes,
Elrock 04.
Someone's already guessed mine in the YouTube chat, which is boulder number 5.
I like Boulder L02.
Oh yeah, that one's good. My favorite, the thing that I like number 4 for is because it's just shaped like a big brick. You can use it to fill in gaps. Is it number 2 is the one that's shaped like an angle? Because that one's great for adding detail to things that don't have enough.
I like Boulder. I actually like Boulder 5 as well. Yeah, L5.
Yeah, 5 is another good big brick.
Oh no, this is a Skyblivion exclusive boulder 5.
Okay.
My least favorite. My least favorite boulder is the big flat one. That big.
Oh, number 3. Yeah. It'd be good if it didn't have that little bump on top, and you could actually make flat areas with it.
Because when you
all right, to more seriously answer the question though,
it clips. Like if you merge it into a wall, that big lump on top, it just sort of looks unnatural. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you use too many of them. I like to use that gigantic rock arch that's under Solitude. I probably shouldn't, but it's so fun to build big rock arches with it. You've got to keep in mind exactly what is supposed to be a set piece that's only used once in the game, and try not to overuse it. We've got a few pieces like that. There's one piece in one of the Iliac Bay tile sets that we've been told repeatedly, stop using that so much. It's supposed to be unique for this dungeon, and every level designer's like, well, but it looks so cool. Why not?
I love the fact that you all have a favorite rock. That's fantastic.
Adorable and sad at the same time. It's sad that when we know what rocks we're talking about as well.
Yeah, it's great. I'm going to take one more community question before we take our kind of last written question before we wrap up. But this one's been pumped up to the top of the list a bit. What mods / games, if any, would you say influenced your work? Not in Easter eggs or references, but in how levels are built, quests are written, or lore expanded? It's a really good question. Anyone want a stab at that?
Yeah, I can go ahead with that one. So, not in terms of like the theme or just copying how a thing looks, but in the design, I would definitely say the Deus Ex series. The first game, and especially Deus Ex Human Revolution, because the levels in that game give you a lot of leeway in determining how you want to approach a goal. And I think that that's something that Skyrim's vanilla dungeons are kind of lacking in, is just having the ability to pick different ways to approach the end of the dungeon. They're rather linear, and I try to design my dungeons so that you have lots of choices. And I look to things like Human Revolution, where there's a vent you can go in through the main entrance, you can climb in through a window, you can break through the ceiling. Just having several different ways to approach something. You've got to keep this in check, of course. You can't design something like Toadstool Hollow where there's 20 different paths you can take and they all lead into a circle.
I was going to say something similar, only like my sort of inspiration was it's Arcane. You know, they made Dishonored and Prey, and they kind of take a similar approach, which is you're able to take many different routes to get to a certain place. And I think a good opportunity for Elder Scrolls is, you know, kind of finding or making a route that kind of suits each play style. I suppose you can't do it every time, but like a route for the sneak archers, a route the route for the warriors is the easiest. He's just gonna, you know, go the primary way and kill everyone. But trying to find a way, you know, to cater to the other play types for your dungeon, I think is good. And like Arcane games in particular, I've been really good at that.
My answer's a
Dishonored is
little-
go on.
I was just gonna say my answer's a little different, less gameplay, more aesthetic. Since I do a lot of ruins, a lot of tombs, things like that, with a lot of sort of overgrowth, I have played through Portal 2 numerous times, and the first like third of that game where the aperture science is overgrown and destroyed and in ruins is something I'll sort of point to or look back on as reference material more than anything very often.
I actually want to change my mention to Dishonored too as well, because Dishonored is a special case not only because it's a stealth game that allows the player lots of options, but it's also that Dishonored has a lot of different ways to play the game. So you can play the game by teleporting around, you can play the game by staying on the floor, or you can play full carnage mode, and the level design is what enables this to happen. So you've got to keep in mind your level design is also needing to match up with how the player wants to play.
Yeah, perfect examples. I think we're gonna. I think it's been a hard panel. We know we've answered some hard questions. I think we've earned the kind of the time a little bit to kick back, enjoy ourselves, and maybe poop on the Havok the creation kit a little bit. So if you guys got any favorite kind of creation kit quirks, some Havok mishaps you want to share with us, or things that has perpetually happened to you over and over again, that if you didn't laugh you'd cry.
I like when you have a wooden cart and you just walk into it and sometimes you just die because I don't know. It's just like you just have the wooden carts that have Havok. Like you just walk into one of those and when it's placed up against a wall.
For me, the lighting system, you can have only a certain number of lights, and Morrowind has much more colorful lights than most other games. So I accidentally created a rave when I had multiple colors of lights and too many in a room, and they started flickering on and off all together in just random assortments.
I hate.
Yeah,
when
the
that
lighting
happens.
system becomes a real pain, especially when you have to factor in that the player can also carry around a torch with them and they can be slinging fireballs, all of which generate their own light. And if you have more than X number of lights on a single static object, it'll just go black. It'll flicker.
Also, if the player has the light spell, they can do light spell, torch,
Even
fire.
worse, isn't there a ring too?
Probably.
So basically, the player by themselves, without any level design lights, can just go ahead and break the way it looks, and it's also our fault somehow.
So please don't do that, everyone. Please.
I'm not sure if we've chosen to just get rid of that spell in Skyblivion because they weren't in Oblivion, so we might just cheat a little and go, yeah, well, screw it, we're going to take it out of Skyblivion. Makes it easier for the level designers.
I think that was one of my biggest contributions to Bruma was when we were doing the QA testing. I went around everything with a torch and as much lighting as I could and tried to break every location possible. In addition to my playtesting of killing every NPC to see what happens.
What's really weird is when you're going through a cave with a torch, like checking for lighting issues, and you're thinking, all right, everything's great. And then way off in the distance, you notice one little rock flickering, like what feels like a mile away from you.
At that point, I just call that a future me problem and I submit the plugin. We'll find that in QA.
Speaking of things breaking, I think the thing that I've had happen most is I'll spend, I'll be working on a little house or a cave or whatever, and it'll have this really nice setup where, the NPC comes here and they eat every so often. And you set up, a nice little dinner set where it's got a plate, a fork, a spoon, and then you put something on the plate and then suddenly the whole room explodes. And it's never pretty. And I can't tell you how many times that happened. It's so bad.
I mean, it sounds like you guys have to put up with a lot of spontaneous combustion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one managed to make its way into our first dev diary. I think it's at 6 minutes, 50 seconds or something. You can see just a wine bottle just shoots across the room at Mach 3. So it does. And we're like, that's perfect. That it has to make it into the dev diary because, what's more Oblivion than that? Or Skyrim.
On a larger scale, Havok is actually responsible for a lot of issues with Beyond Skyrim development, at least. People often ask us, why is the world not one gigantic world space? Why can't you walk from Illiope to Black Marsh without any loading screens? It's mostly because of Havok. There is a limitation to how many cells can be in a world space before Havok just quits working and everything falls through the floor. So we had to split it up, and in fact, some provinces have had to split up even further because of that limitation.
No. I think we have time for one more question, maybe. We do have one that's been kind of thrown up at me. Where did it go? I've lost it. Do we have time? Do we actually know if we have time for the question? I don't think we do.
When do we get thrown out of here?
Yeah,
As long as we all promise to answer it quickly.
I thought we had 5 more minutes. I
Do
think.
we have 5 more minutes?
I think so.
I thought we were a quarter. Well, lovely. So, what was that question? I think it was
It's on level design.
It was a level design. Yes, yeah. So this is another question from the community. On a team, what is your workflow for assuring continuity in environment/locations between different level designers or interior designers?
So that is something that I would say falls mostly to the field of the level design director. The level design director is ultimately the person who needs to be responsible for going through all of the plugins and then making sure that everything is up to our high quality standards and B, consistent with everything else. So it's got to be able to be merged in cleanly. Somebody else is saying something? Go ahead.
Oh yeah, what I usually do is I think just this merge we got the assets in to be able to do the interiors for forts. And so what I usually like to do is I like to make a template so for everyone can like take a look at that and follow it and kind of use that as a design to jump off from. So that way everyone kind of works from the same sort of example. I think that really helps. If they have like a template to go off from first. I think that's something the lead should do as well.
Yeah, that is useful.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all that we've got time today for. So thank you very much to all our panelists. I had so much fun learning so much from you guys. Stay tuned. We've got our voice acting panel, our art panel, our Skyblivion walkthrough, and our fan art contest still coming up, guys. Thank you very much. Stay tuned.
Hey guys.
Used to see ya.
Goodbye. Thank you.